WWF Raw is a professional wrestling game released for the Sega 32X in 1994. The game features 12 of the biggest WWF stars from the mid-90s, and in many ways is a great time capsule for this period in pro wrestling. Acclaim released a number of WWF licensed games during the 90s, and Raw represents their final effort from the 16-bit era of video games. Basic fighting moves like punching and kicking play just a minor role in the combat. Instead, the main fighting component has you lock up with your opponent. Once locked up, a gauge will appear above the grappling wrestlers. From here, you need to simply mash buttons as quickly as possible to win the grapple. If you win, your character will perform a wrestling move depending on which combination of buttons you were mashing. Having a 6-button Genesis controller does help a little bit, with the X, Y, and Z buttons acting as combinations of A, B, and C. Once you wear down your opponent's life bar, you can then pin them and win the match. Additionally, a few submission holds will cause your opponent to tap out. This grappling mechanic gives these wrestling games a different feel compared to traditional fighting games. While I was very tolerant to this style and actually enjoyed WWF Raw on the Genesis as a kid, I can't say it has aged all that well. Simply locking up with an opponent and then mashing buttons doesn't make for an engaging experience. Each character has a finishing move. You can jump off the top rope, take the wrestling outside the ring, and even punch out the ref, but the core of the game is still mashing buttons, and everything else feels tacked on. The graphics don't do much to help the cause either. There is some variety in the shape of the characters, being small, medium, and large, but they all look fairly similar. The animations are all fairly basic, and the game never gives the sensation of violence or power. The sound effects follow suit, with basic grunts and thwacks that also fail to really deliver an impact. Each of the wrestlers does have some decent renditions of their theme music on the character select screen, but this never carries over into the actual game. WWF Raw features a few different modes in an attempt to add some variety. In addition to the basic one-on-one mode, there are a couple of tag team matches allowing you to select a pair of wrestlers and take on another pair. The most interesting mode is the Royal Rumble, putting a full 6 wrestlers on screen at once while you make your way through all 11 opponents. Even in this mode, the core of the game remains the same: lock on with an opponent and mash buttons. WWF Raw does support up to 4 players, which is awesome, unless of course they have superior button mashing skills. The Sega 32X port of WWF Raw is infamous for being nearly identical to its 16-bit counterparts. It's true too, there isn't much different here. The menus are updated with some higher quality photos and better sound, and that is honestly it. So little is changed, I'm not even sure why Acclaim bothered porting this to the Sega 32X at all. It's really hard to recommend these 16-bit wrestling games. The combat is shallow, and there is very little depth to the gameplay mechanics. I appreciate the fact that this feels different than a traditional fighting game, but being different for the sake of being different doesn't necessarily make for an engaging experience. There is also no progression here at all. There is no career mode, you can't win anything, and there is nothing to unlock. After each and every match, the game simply returns you to the main menu. There is no incentive to slog through the game's boring mechanics. Lastly, wrestling should feel over the top and exciting. WWF Raw fails to capture any of the excitement of the WWF. Honestly, don't bother with this one. 2 out of 5.